Jack Smith, again, has filed the appeal in the case out of Florida to try and keep his job as special counsel. We will be filing our brief to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals in the United States versus Trump on October 3rd, so very soon. A reason why to support the work of the ACLJ. And then yesterday afternoon, we get this new filing. It's a superseding indictment. All that means is basically is a new indictment involving the January 6th charges. The same charges, by the way, two of which the Supreme Court has said you can't bring. So I don't know why Jack Smith is including them and thinks that he's going to sneak that by the U.S. Supreme Court ultimately. Why on earth this case has been refiled other than the fact that it's been filed for political purposes, which, by the way, at this point, folks, if that really truly is the case and through our FOIA and that Merrick Garland's approved a filing, when people are voting in 10 days in states like North Carolina where they start receiving their mail-in ballots, and in 45 states, again, people are voting before, it's 10 days versus 60 days. That's what we've talked about here because, again, this idea, 90% of the country begins voting within 60 days from when this new superseding indictment was filed. So it completely goes against the Department of Justice white paper. But I want to bring in my dad, Chief Counsel of the ACLJ, Jay Secchio, because, Dad, we have seen time and time again, especially this year, a redefinition of terms by the Harris and Biden administration, whether the term was abortion, whether it's now election, and now it's not. Now they want it to go back to election day instead of what they used to define election as, which it was election season.
Yeah, well, let me tell you what this new superseding indictment isn't. It isn't any new allegation on anything. Zero. Nothing. It's the same allegations as before, recast in a way to try to get around a Supreme Court decision that was a complete defeat for Jack Smith. You brought up the point about the Department of Justice own policy. That policy through the Office of Legal Counsel, which is the advisor, the legal advisor to the Attorney General, has had a policy for decades saying there can be no legal action taken within 60 days of an election because it could be deemed interference or putting your thumb on the scale. What they've done here is redefine interference. So no longer is it interference if you just destroy a person by filing indictment after indictment after indictment, even when you've been losing, which they have, and they get away with that. So that's where that is right now.
And you believe that the only way, because of these policies, and we're going to instruct our ACLJ FOIA team, Dad, to FOIA Department of Justice with a real direct question so that everybody knows, not just for Donald Trump, but for everybody is running for office, because it's important to know in these election seasons what the rules of the game are. Have they redefined the Office of Legal Counsel memo to not include actually when people are voting, but to only include that window for election day? Or have they thrown out the entire 60-day rule at the Department of Justice? Have they written a new white paper that has been widely distributed? That's not about top secret information. That's information that they, again, usually produce in a public way and discuss in a public way. But I want to go to the second point here, because you said, it's like a copy and paste. They just cut a few pages out where they absolutely couldn't keep bringing the charges because of the Supreme Court case. And we were involved in the case, in the Fisher case, and yet that two of these charges out of the four are still there. And these were two charges the Supreme Court said a January 6th, one of those protesters who entered the Capitol illegally, while it could be charged with other crimes, could not be charged with obstruction of or the attempt to obstruct an official proceeding or a conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, because they said that's not what this was. And of course, now they're trying to apply it to President Trump for giving a speech when the Supreme Court wouldn't apply it for someone who was actually in the building when they had to actually stop the counting for a bit of time.
Right. So you've got the entire process of which Jack Smith is still proceeding. And you got to say, without question, he is trying everything he can do to bring these criminal cases to fruition, because there's another aspect of this. This is the taxpayers' money. And I think the latest indication was he spent something like $14 million in the last 8 months or so. And then on top of that, add to it, and this is to me is the other aspect of it. There's going to be an election in, basically 2 months. So to go through all of this when you know there's going to be an election, how is it not election interference when you continue to bring motions and superseding indictments?
Well, I think that what people too want to understand with this, they see obviously Jack Smith has got, and I want to explain for the ACLJ. We're going to be filing, Dad, in the case at the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals on October 3rd. That's when our amicus brief is due. That we agree with Judge Cannon that Jack Smith was an unlawful appointment, and we need to throw out this whole idea of special counsel. And if Congress wants this, if DOJ wants this, they need to pass a law. They need to establish an office. Someone needs to be confirmed. That you should not be able to basically pick out of thin air and give unlimited budget to a super U.S. attorney that has never gone through the congressional U.S. Senate confirmation process. But on top of that, we're also going to look at the FOIA here. We filed in Fisher to get those charges thrown out. I mean, Jack Smith is not getting a case done before people are voting. So this, Dad, I can only imagine is this is why I said I think we are entering now the actual Banana Republic territory, because Merrick Garland would have only approved this because of the political damage they think this could cause President Trump. The case is not moving. There's no way this case is done, obviously, before the election. People are start voting in 10 days. So it's in 60 days, the election, so this whole idea, and 45 states are all going to be voting within the 60-day window from when this was filed yesterday. So the whole idea here is this is not about seeking justice. This is about seeking political points against your opponents.
Well, it's like political retribution.
Yeah.
Because what they've really done here in bringing this superseding indictment yesterday, while the candidates are out, while we're a few days away from the first presidential debate again, it's a kind of a repeat. But the fact is, Jack Smith still was desiring to pursue it. So you want to talk about, when they talk about election interference, like you said, the Democrats always would argue that any interference with elections, including early voting, should all be allowed. But now it no longer constitutes, under this Department of Justice guidelines, an election when you can start voting in 4 weeks.
Dad, this is why, when you go through this, why it's so important right now for people to support the work of the ACLJ. We've been on this since the 14th Amendment cases. We look at this case, again, as election interference and part of election integrity as well. We were involved with the Fisher case at the U.S. Supreme Court. We're going to be involved with the Jack Smith appointment case. So we're filing that October 3rd at the 11th Circuit. And I am going to have our FOIA team look at going right to the DOJ on this, whether or not the white paper still is in existence, and have they redefined the terms like we have continued to see this administration do. Now, this time around, redefining the terms not more broadly, but in a more limited way when it suits them.
No, I think, look, the reality is also, I think, that you talk about the work of the ACLJ here, how critical it is. You said you're right. We were counsel in the cases where the 14th Amendment attempts to take former President Trump off the ballots. We won that at the Supreme Court of the United States. We were involved in, I think, 5 or 6 of the ones of the district court on all this. And this is just another interference. And you talk about Judge Cannon's order. Andrew McCarthy, who was a former assistant U.S. attorney, called her opinion scholarly. And by the way, Clarence Thomas has already opined the same position. So this is not some novel thing. So you may have a situation where the prosecutor himself, as we've always alleged, should have never been there in the first place.
Dad, I appreciate you joining us on the broadcast for that update, and we'll keep going back to you as this kind of progresses. It's not going to progress a lot further because, again, the elections are going to begin, so this is all just done to take political hits. And when you start using the legal system to politically try and damage opponents, you are in a banana republic. Whether or not you're putting those opponents behind bars or not, we'll see that with the sentencing with Judge Merchan as well, because so far he has not agreed yet to the request to that delay yet, has he?
Correct.
Yeah, and even though both parties are okay with it, because they want to appear like they're not always trying to interfere with the elections. You got to support the work of the ACLJ. We're down to the final 3 days of our Life and Liberty Drive. I mean, your gift will be doubled, dollar for dollar. Your support can't come at a more critical time as Biden and Harris continue their unconstitutional prosecutions against Trump. We've jumped into action, as you know, and are preparing to file an amicus brief to remove Biden and Harris's Special Counsel Jack Smith. As we gear up for that, our legal teams are still in so many other crucial battles. We've submitted FOIA requests and are preparing lawsuits over the targeting of Tulsi Gabbard and anyone else targeted by the Quiet Skies program. You could be next. The weaponization of government against conservatives, well, we're already seeing it impact you. That's why we have to defeat it as early as possible. We're fighting the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the abortion industry for their smear campaign against pro-life sitters. We have less than 3 days left in our drive. Please go to ACLJ.org to have your gifts doubled. Dollar for dollar, no matter the amount. Keep us in the fight and have your gifts doubled today at ACLJ.org.